Okay, we are going to start. It's 2:01 on Bastille Day. And we're going to start with a couple of guests we have today. We're going to hear everything we need to know about all the changings in zoning in the city. Jim Wasilak, who's the zoning administrator, and Holly Simmons, who's the deputy zoning administrator. And I think they have some screen sharing to do with us also. So I'm going to turn it over to you folks to fill us in on what's going on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making the time for us to be here today. We're really excited to talk to you about our recently adopted zoning ordinance and zoning map. So I will go ahead and share my screen. All right. So we do have about a 15-20 minute presentation, time for Q&A. We want to go over the project background and overview. We'll talk about some of the outcomes of the project, ways that you all can stay informed and stay engaged, and then again, any questions at the very end of the presentation. As mentioned, I'm Holly Simmons, and with me is Jim Wasilak. So for our project overview, as noted on June 29th, the Rockville Mayor and Council unanimously voted to adopt a comprehensive update to the city zoning ordinance and zoning map. So this was really a major milestone for the city. A lot of congratulations go to our mayor and council for getting this across the finish line. This was the culmination of a years-long process. So you can see from our timeline here, a couple of things that happened before we kicked this project off were the last update, comprehensive update to our zoning ordinance, which occurred in 2009, and that followed the comprehensive plan adoption from the early 2000s. So it's kind of what we do in Rockville. We adopt a comprehensive plan and then have comprehensively overhauled all of our zoning and land use regulations. Then in 2021, the Rockville 2040 Comprehensive Plan was adopted. And that comp plan contained a lot of recommendations for land use, for zoning, for economic development, housing, etc. And that was when, once that was adopted, that's when the city started thinking about updating the zoning ordinance itself. So this project, our zoning ordinance rewrite and comprehensive map amendment, or ZOR and CMA for short, kicked off in the fall of 2023. We had brought a consultant on board. They did end up helping us with a number of things, but I will say at the end of the day, we really operated on an in-house model, bringing our consultants in for kind of technical analyses, specific recommendations, but drafted the vast majority of the ordinance in-house in close coordination between our Community Planning and Development Services Department, which Jim and I are located in, and our city attorney's office. We did a lot of pre-drafting work in the fall of 2023 through winter of 2024. Lots of engagement, quite a bit of analysis, preliminary policy development, and then ultimately began drafting the zoning ordinance in January of 2025. We published our very first draft, which we called a staff draft, because although we had been going through and bringing key policy decisions to the mayor and council between January and about October of 2025 to get their direction, the majority of it, we had reflected that direction, but there was a lot of information and a lot of policy in that document that the mayor and council and the planning commission had not seen yet. So we very specifically said, this is a staff draft. And on December 1st, the mayor and council took action to give us the green light to move forward with the adoption process. So that was very exciting. The review through the adoption process lasted December of 2025, when mayor and council authorized us to move forward, through June 29th, when the ordinance was ultimately adopted. We had 4 work sessions before the planning commission. They made a recommendation to the mayor and council in February, and then in March, the mayor and council picked up the process, and they had 4 work sessions, ultimately culminating in adoption. So now really the last thing that we're looking at in terms of this particular project is for the 2 ordinances, one for the zoning ordinance and one for the zoning map, for them to become effective, which happens actually quite quickly. We are going to have them effective on August 1st, so just over 2 weeks away. And before we dive into outcomes, the big purposes of the zoning ordinance rewrite and comprehensive map amendment, in addition to achieving the land use policy outcomes identified in the Rockville 2040 comprehensive plan, that was kind of the big catalyst for this project. They were also to make our development review and permitting processes faster, accountable, smarter, and transparent. This is kind of a pull in from what we call our FAST initiative. You can see there FAST, faster, accountable, smarter, and transparent. And that has been a big effort from the city in 2 phases, starting in 2018, just to really streamline and make our development and review and permitting processes much more transparent and understandable and easier to navigate. We're also at a baseline looking to ensure compliance with current federal and state regulations. We worked to incorporate the city's commitment to equity, resilience, and sustainability, as well as incorporating best planning practices throughout. And we did a significant job of reorganizing and modernizing the zoning ordinance to make it more accessible, as well as introducing kind of contemporary graphics. So into project outcomes. Big key things. I mean, the document for the zoning ordinance, it is about 300 pages long and a lot has changed, but really key highlights include that we created 4 new zones. 3 of them are mixed use transit district zones with varying heights. Those were really intended to implement the recommendations of the Town Center Master Plan, which was adopted back in January of 2025, and it recommended significantly increasing the heights in our transit-oriented areas. So we created 3 new zones that have base heights of 85 feet, 200 feet, and 235 feet, with additional bonuses up to 100 feet for the provision of affordable housing in the higher of the 2 zones and 50 feet in the lower zone. Those are implemented in the town center area. And then we also applied them down near the Twinbrook Metro Station and up by the Shady Grove Metro Station as well. So that has resulted in increased allowable building heights, significantly, frankly, increased allowable building heights in our transit-oriented areas through those rezonings. We also rezoned other areas of the city to achieve additional city goals, including a number of single unit development properties along the Veers Mill corridor, kind of focused in the areas where bus rapid transit will be going in, and those have additional ability to develop slightly more diverse housing types, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage courts where you have a number of small dwellings around an interior courtyard, and townhouses. We also believe that the ordinance creates the conditions for economic development, including much clearer and more objective development standards. Anything that was more of a guideline, a should, as opposed to a shall. We've removed those, identified which ones really needed to stay, turned them into requirements. We did a lot of work with the language of the ordinance to ensure that our requirements are as clear as they can be, including, frankly, a full review of that original staff draft that I've talked about, the one that was released for public review in December. We reviewed the entire thing to ensure that it was using plain language, plain English throughout. And when we released a revised staff draft in April, it incorporated a whole lot of revisions that were intended to retain the policy established in the staff draft, but make it much clearer and more easy to understand. We also worked to streamline our development review and subdivision processes. A lot of this was recommended as ways to implement that FAST initiative that I talked about. And we did do a number of things to streamline those processes, cut down on time, combine needed meetings, etc. And we do anticipate that that will result in time savings for folks trying to develop in the city. We're allowing a wider range of business types in appropriate locations. So we did a full review of the use table, all of the different uses that are permitted within the city. We identified ones that were quite old and outdated, for example, taxi cab stand, and said it's really unlikely that we're going to have any more taxi cab stands in the city of Rockville, so maybe we'll eliminate that use, but we'll introduce some new ones that we didn't have previously, including electric vehicle charging. That's something that we did not have previously, and now it's in the new zoning ordinance, and we worked with our environmental management division colleagues to really decide what would be required for that use. And then we worked also to consolidate uses and to update terms. For example, in the current ordinance, we have something called consumable goods for use in the home. Jim, correct me if I am wrong on that. And we said that is not something that the layperson can understand. Frankly, that's not something that half of our staff can understand. What are we really trying to say here? Is it a retail establishment? Sure seems like it. Let's call it a retail establishment. So we were able to take a number of different things that had kind of opaque names and combine them and make sure that the terms were really clear and easy to understand. And then, and this is a big one, we updated our parking standards. So in and around transit, we completely eliminated the regulatory standards for parking. And then everywhere else throughout the city, we really looked to right size our parking requirements. So this is something we pulled heavily on our consultants for. We had them review every single use in our parking table, every single updated use in our parking table to ensure that the minimum requirements were reflective of best practices and leaning toward the more flexible end of things. So now if you look at our use table, if you look at our parking table, and if you look at our bicycle parking table, the uses are all consistent. They're consistent across zones. They're consistent from one table to the other. They have our updated use list, and all of those standards have been updated to ensure that they are relaxed a bit, right-sized, and consistent with best practices. And then we also introduced, again, on the note of parking, we introduced a new process for requesting parking reductions. If they're not relaxed enough, there's a way to go ahead and ask for a parking reduction. We also introduced adjustments. So if there are certain things that you are doing or providing within the city, for example, again, electric vehicle parking, if you're providing more of that, then you can right off the top reduce your parking requirements. So we think that the parking standards we've really right-sized them and we've made them much more flexible. We've also expanded our opportunities for diverse housing types. I've spoken about this a little bit. That's really looking at opportunities, additional areas to allow those missing middle housing types that I talked about, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage courts, and then again, reorganized the ordinance for accessibility and ease of use. I've talked a bit about the language, I've mentioned the graphics, but we also were really purposeful in thinking about how do we structure this thing. In our current ordinance, we have 21 articles. In our new ordinance, we have 13, and we made robust use of divisions so that there are kind of chapters inside of the articles that you can then go to and titling, ensuring that kind of everything makes sense. The material within each article really corresponds to the bucket that the article creates. And then I'll leave it at that. I think I've about covered that one. So this is kind of highlights our project in review. This project took nearly 3 years of work. Over the course of the last 20 months, we had 78 public meetings, if you can believe it, including 9 with our mayor and council, 9 with our planning commission. At the time of adoption, or at the time that I first provided this slide for our mayor and council, we had gotten 269 public comments, but we had a flurry right at the end, so that number is actually a little bit higher than 269. We worked with 7 city departments to produce the final ordinance. We went through 3 public drafts. That initial staff draft in December, the revised staff draft in April, and then a final staff draft in June, which the mayor and council did end up making 6 minor amendments to that final staff draft. And that the final staff draft with those 6 amendments is what became our final zoning ordinance. As I noted, we introduced 4 new zones. We covered 100% of the city in this update. It's a complete modernization of our ordinance from 2009, and we really think that this is a shared vision that the mayor and council have now turned into law. So it's very exciting. Just briefly, ways to stay informed. We established a project page through Engage Rockville, which is our platform for all of the various projects going on in the city. If you are curious about like what's on, what are people paying attention to, it's not a bad idea to go to engagerockville.com generally, and you can see kind of what are the big initiatives at the city. We established this back in September of 2024, and we have been building it out consistently ever since then. So there's a lot of project information. If you wanted to go back and read every single news update that we pushed out every 2 weeks to a month since August of 2024, they are all located on Engage Rockville. There's lots of project materials, including there's a banner at the top, and if you want to go see our new zoning ordinance and zoning map, that is the best place to look. You're able to see exactly, okay, here's a link to the ordinance, here's a link to the map. And then in the project documents, you can actually also find an interactive version of the map as well. Um, so with that, we are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
All right, any questions, please? Seeing none so far, I'm just going to ask. So the 1,000-foot view, what would you say are the most major changes, particularly that would affect the business community or people trying to come into the city of Rockville? Can you give me a couple of 3 or 4 highlights of that? And I know the biggest thing, and we've talked about this, is it's going to be faster and more efficient and all the rest of that. And that's wonderful. But what else would you say about this that people are going to notice?
This is a great question. Honestly, I think it's going to be so many little things, but I will say probably the big one, as you noted, process changes. Definitely, we really are confident that the processes that we've established are going to result in positive changes for our business community. So we're really excited about that. I think the parking is another big one. We even kind of looking at different cases, we really worked to make sure, for example, this is kind of nitty-gritty, but currently in our ordinance, off the office use and the medical office use are treated differently in terms of parking requirements. And that causes a lot of difficulty when we have medical establishments that want to go into standard office buildings where their parking rate is higher than what was originally approved with the site plan. And sometimes, these buildings can't allow tenants to come in because they don't have sufficient parking. So in the new ordinance, we cleaned that up and we said if you're a medical office, if you're an office, the parking rate is the same. So it's things like that that I think, it's kind of in the details, but we really were purposeful in thinking through what are the issues that we've seen and how do we make sure that it is going to be easier to start and to operate a business in the city of Rockville. Jim, did you have any other things that are coming to mind for you?
I think one thing is something that you already mentioned, which is the kind of the consistency and updating of the uses in the code, so we can tell exactly how a business can fit into the code, and it's more understandable to the layperson as well, so they can understand that as well.
One other thing, and this is probably another seems like kind of a nitty-gritty detail. Our current ordinance uses gross floor area restrictions throughout, and we've entirely eliminated those from the commercial uses. So, for example, if you were previously a veterinary clinic in the mixed-use neighborhood commercial district that was capped at 5,000 square feet operating space, that cap has gone away. And those caps have gone away throughout. We kind of decided, these are really not functioning the way that they were intended to function, and they're a big inhibitor to businesses locating within the city. So if they're not serving a really good regulatory purpose, let's just eliminate them. And that was something that the mayor and council were really purposeful about pursuing and eliminating.
Any other questions? Cindy, do you have any questions? I know you've been all over this. I know you're as familiar as anybody is. Do you have any questions?
No, no. I mean, I think it's obviously a really important thing that the planning department has achieved, in addition to everything they did for the town center plan, as far as and my board has said it's probably the most impactful economic development action that's been taken by the city in a very long time. So it's very exciting. We did pull together comments from the business community and provided them, and many of them were incorporated. So, I think that, nothing's ever perfect, but this is really great. Thank you guys.
Yep. Definitely headed in the right direction. I think maybe the last board meeting I mentioned that I had run into a guy who was an executive with a chain called Call Your Mother. And they have one at Pike and Rose, and they have one somewhere else, I've forgotten where. And they were trying to open on St. Elmo and Bethesda. And he said, almost impossible dealing with the county. He said, it's like they don't want you to open a business. And I said to him, then come to Rockville. So maybe they will. We'll see.
That's definitely the message. Rockville
Yes.
is open for business.
Much more open than some others. I won't throw stones in any one particular direction, other than the way I just did.
No, I think
So-
that's excellent to hear, and I think that's a message that we heard really clearly from the mayor and council. So we really tried to weave that in throughout. Cindy, it's excellent to hear that your board has received it well. That's very exciting. So I would say too, I mean, the message that you're conveying, Mr. Barkley, about Rockville is open for business. If there's a way, if you think of any ways that we in planning can continue to push that narrative, to promote this zoning ordinance and the process changes, please don't hesitate to let us know, because that is part of, we're headed into implementation now, and communications and promotion is a big aspect of that. So we've been thinking, how do we reach out to folks? How do we let them know, come to Rockville, we want you here? So this meeting seems like a first step. And if you all have any ideas, we are really happy to hear them.
I have an idea. How would you like to be on our podcast? We're like number 28 out of community podcasts. So, I mean, we have a great podcast. Would you like to hop on our podcast and talk?
That's such an excellent invitation. I really love that, Margie. I think we should talk about that, and Jim and I should probably also talk with our director. That's a great idea, though. Thank you.
Margie's been trying to drag me into this century, slowly but surely, and she's getting there now. Okay, any other questions? Gone. Thank you so much for the presentation. We appreciate it.
you
And even
again.
more importantly, thank you for the city being more receptive to business and economic development. It's a sea change from what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, as I'm sure Jim knows, because he and I have been around for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Happy
you
to
all.
do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank
and
you.
Jim.
Yeah.
Okay, Cindy, I heard you might have to leave, so I'm going to turn to you and see if you have a report you'd like to give
I
us.
actually no longer do. I got my stuff done early, and in large part thanks to you, Brian, for letting me get my document notarized.
My staff is so efficient. I was running out for a minute and I said, well, Cindy may be coming in to get something notarized. She said she's already been and done it. No problem.
No, they were great. I appreciate it. Sorry, Linda, but having to notarize documents for the city is just such a pain. Like, I don't know why we have to do it.
I don't either.
Thank
As a
you,
lawyer, I
Cindy.
don't know why.
Thanks for sharing.